其实也他妈中华人民主义，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。三代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟铁岭河上，神州阳光普照。江山笑，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，人笑险如潮。盘古开天风潮，3年多的爆料，就是给雅斯克东方实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显祖国，照亮东方的眼。戳破光辉的火焰，我准备了但是多年，越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多雄剑，我们中华只能虚度。听风笑，收归正道，一周他老自逍遥。苍生笑。盘古相聚在今朝，我定报 The one to save the world, sitting behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action. Take down the system. Take down, action. Take down the system.他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP！
For the games you want to play, bring it on and I will fight to the end. Just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. Cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all life for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. The bullets little
你
longer.
完了，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，你完了，干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 还能让我们远离恐惧。Take down CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人
Let
们
the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
，Take down CCP。
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down the evil CCP。
Please stop. 3, 2. Stop.
Good evening, Fringers. Thank you for joining us this evening and welcome to episode 22 of The Fringe. I am your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in English and in Chinese on gtv.org MOS Talk on every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 to 8 p.m. We are honored to have you here with us this evening, and we certainly appreciate your patronage. Please spread the word about our show to all of your family and friends and subscribe and follow us on gtv.org at MOS Talk. Okay, now I'd like to introduce you to our regular Friday night co-host, who was also my co-host this past Tuesday and the previous Friday. It's like a regular here again. Fringers and Fringettes, let's please give a nice warm welcome to Ada. Welcome back to the show, Ada. Great to see you again. It's been a busy 3 days since the last time I saw you. We have a lot to cover.
We certainly do, David. And good evening, our Fringers. It's so good to be back here. So this week, there's been a lot of movement in not only China, but the rest of the world. We will cover the much talked about Xinjiang cotton, as well as the latest of Myanmar and the conflicts within Japan and North Korea. So let's get into today's show.
Yeah, let's get into it. There's a load to talk about. So this first video we're going to play is China's response and their definition of what human rights really is, because, you know, the CCP knows all about human rights. Isn't that right, Ada?
That's right, and we're just going to see exactly how they define it.
That's right. Why don't you roll that video for us, please, Matthew? Thank you.
China stands against all forms of violence, and we express our condolences to the victims. We ask the U.S. to take practical and effective measures in protecting minority groups. As we've seen on TV, the mass shooting in Atlanta has not yet been settled, but it's been followed by another similar incident in Colorado. These acts of racial discrimination and hate crimes have occurred. China stands against all forms of violence, and we express our condolences to the victims. We ask the U.S. to take practical and effective measures in protecting minority groups. As we've seen on TV, the mass shooting in Atlanta has not yet been settled, but it's been followed by another similar incident in Colorado. These acts of racial discrimination and hate crimes have occurred frequently, which proves from one aspect. Mass shooting in Atlanta has not yet been settled, but it's been followed by another.
I think we're having some kind of
incident in
technical
Colorado.
difficulty here,
These
folks.
acts
If you
of
could just
racial
bear with us for a
discrimination
minute,
and hate crimes have
we'll
occurred
get
frequently,
this fixed for
which
you.
proves from one aspect that the U.S. has serious problems in protecting the rights and safety of its people. We are saddened by deaths of Chinese citizens in these attacks. We sympathize with the American people suffering from the impact of the pandemic, racial tensions, and violence. We urge the U.S. to face these issues and truly fulfill its promise of protecting human rights.
Okay, so we're going to break this one down here. This is shocking. I'm not sure. I think we're having some difficulty with that video. I'm not sure if the whole video played or not, but we'll definitely talk about it anyway. Did the whole thing play, Ada?
Yes, I believe it did. At the end, it did the whole thing, that the information we needed to get across.
Awesome. Okay, as long as we got that across. Yeah, so, you know, it happens, folks. We apologize. We're a brand new baby, you know, in our baby stages right now. So we're going to crawl before we walk and walk before we run. So anyway, but getting back to the very important topic at matter is that we're discussing here is China, Ada, and how they are all of a sudden these experts on human rights. The same country with the same leadership. Now, we're obviously not blaming the Chinese people for this. They're just kind of, most of them, I guess, are brainwashed, but some of them do know what's going on. We have a lot of supporters over there we know for us. But China is saying that they stand against all forms of violence, and they ask the U.S. to protect our minority groups. Listen, China, CCP, we already do that. We actually have organizations that were created just for that. This whole thing where China is trying to school us on how to control and how to treat our people, they should be the last country in the world telling us how to do this. And we know why that is, Ada, because of what is going on with them and their genocide of an entire race of people, the minority Uyghurs that live in the western part of the mountainous region of China, in the Xinjiang province that we talk about every single episode. And of course, they deny that this even exists. And of course, we know better. So China telling us, the CCP rather, telling us what their stance on our treatment of our people is a complete farce. They talked about Colorado and Atlanta, these mass shootings that you and I talked about on Tuesday. And China, of course, the CCP, is defining these as hate crimes. And we fully know that these are not hate crimes. What happened were first of all, they found out, and the irony of this is the first thing they found out was the 8 people that were killed in the spa shooting, 6 of them were Asian women, and it was a sex crime. It was a deviant sexual nature, the guy that committed these crimes. So it was never a hate crime. Of course, the CCP and our left, it seems like, are teaming up against us to make this look like a hate crime by white people to further their narrative that white people are all white supremacists, and it goes back to supporting Trump.
Right.
And the other one that happened in Colorado was horrible also. And they found out, the first thing they did, though, when this happened, was they said a white man as a hate crime has killed 10 people in Colorado. And they found out, when they found out the real information, that he's actually a Muslim from Syria. So the fact that even happened, where they're jumping to conclusions and saying that a white person did it and it's white supremacy and defining it as a hate crime, these are all things that, first of all, we shouldn't be doing until we have the facts in order. And second of all, we need to realize that the CCP is going to jump on board with this, because their goal is to take over the world. And the way they do that is to pit us against each other. China says it has serious problems. The U.S. has serious problems protecting the safety and rights of its people. That we have a problem with that. The same country with the same government that seems to have a problem doing that with the Uyghurs and their own people. Not to mention the genocide they've caused all over this world with the virus they created in the lab in Wuhan, China. China says they sympathize with the American people suffering with the impact of the pandemic and the racial tension and violence that came out of that. This right here, if anything, of all things, is the one that really blows my mind. Do you see what they're doing here, Ada? They're pitting us against each other. America, we're so sorry for you people in America that are suffering from the impact of COVID. The COVID that you created and destroyed the world with. You're telling us to that you're sympathizing with them. You're the one that killed us. You are the one that created this. Yes. And the impact of it, it caused racial tension and violence, and you're siding with the people that are against all this. This is such a ridiculous narrative coming from such a communist regime and a bad regime as the CCP. And China then urges the U.S. to face these issues as if we're not, and to protect human rights. Ada, I don't know about you, but this is the most hypocritical interview I've ever seen of any world leader or any country ever in the history of the world, because we know what's happening in China, and they're telling us to protect our citizens and to make sure that we are following our own human rights. It's our own citizens that are revolting against us. We're not doing anything in violation of their human rights. Black Lives Matter was created out of the hatred for white people and police. They burned down police stations, police cars. They murdered people. They looted. They rioted. How is that? How are we against human rights when they're the ones that are doing that to us? And they're siding with Black Lives Matter, saying, yeah, Black Lives Matter is a great organization because they're fighting for their own rights. That's not what it's about at all. Black Lives Matter is about getting out there and getting stuff for free, because that's all they really did. They looted and rioted and got things for free, all because a criminal which is awful. What happened to George Floyd, I'll never say that was a great decision that cop made, but there's so much more behind that than just George Floyd. And then we have BLM doing what they're doing, and China siding with them, telling them that we need to protect human rights, and like we don't. We have organizations. I talked about this in the last episode. NAACP,
Yes.
National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This is what it's there for. If they feel like they're being there's some racial profiling going on against them, they can go to NAACP and they'll investigate it. They'll make sure the rights. And we have something that covers the rights of all of our people, and it's called the Constitution with amendments. So China doesn't have that. I don't know why. You know what? I'm done. I don't know why China would even try to tell us how human rights should be protected when they're the ones that are guilty of this. They're probably doing this just to rile us up anyway, Ada. It's so ridiculous.
It really is. And honestly, from that video by Hua Chunying, she is the director of Foreign Ministry of Information. It just comes to show the kind of information they're spreading and the kind of lies they're spreading within China, which is why a lot of people are completely brainwashed. It's not the people's fault. It's definitely not, but definitely the evil CCP that is brainwashing their citizens with false information over and over again. And China is doing what they do best, which is directing all of the negative energy to another country. So instead of facing their own national problems and facing those questions about what's happening in Xinjiang or about the virus, they just found a scapegoat, which is the US at the moment. They are just going to point everything at the US, from BLM to right now the rallies with the AAPI community. We also know that there are moles within those rallies trying to make the situation much worse than what it already is. And not only at the Alaskan summit that we saw last week, but this week with Hua Chunying, we see a lot of demonstration of the sort of distraction they're trying to create and distracting everybody from the rest of the world to focus their attention on the US instead of on themselves, where obviously they have a lot of problematic issues going on.
Yeah, it's a complete hypocrisy again. Sorry, I got frustrated at the end there, Ada. This is just unbelievable that a government a government that is practicing what they're doing and committing these violent crimes against the Uyghurs, raping, sterilizing the men, forced abortions. They're pulling these people away from their families. They're taking all their any rights or freedoms that they had, including their religion, which is their most sacred thing to them, away from them, and then telling us that we need to make sure that we watch and take care of our own people. You're comparing apples to oranges. You can't compare the two. And what's crazy about this is I've actually gotten on, and I probably might even bring this up later again. I was on YouTube, and I look at videos and I do some research along with the research team to look at different things that are going on in the world and what people are thinking about things. And I like to read the little comments below and see what people are saying about the videos, Ada, that they're showing. And man, I was getting harassed by what I guess are supporters of China. They might have been CCP, I don't know. But one of the things I brought up was, they were saying how, we need to take care of our own people before we start worrying about China and what they're doing to the Uyghurs, which is mass genocide. And it's, a complete disregard for the rights of human beings, and telling me we need to take care of our own first before we do that. And I asked them, well, how are you on here right now on this internet? You need a VPN to even get out of China, don't you? So they understood that, And the thing is, I'm trying to help these people, but the problem is, and something our fringers out there need to realize, people that watch this show, our American friends that maybe are watching it for the first time or just getting adjusted to what the show's about, is that the people of China are not should not be held responsible for what's going on in China. They're basically brainwashed. They are, and that's kind of where we're headed here, Ada, and it's scary.
It's either they're brainwashed or they're paid by the government. Here at the new federal state of China, we see some of them, and we call them in a slang called running dogs, which are those that work for the CCP on very little money. Some people call them the 50 cents because honestly, it takes 50 cents to buy their speech and have them propaganda for the CCP in comments or just on the internet, on social media, spreading fake news, when they're not 100% sure what the truth is anyways. So it's honestly very sad to see this happening, which is why it's all the more important to spread the truth so more people can become awake and wake up from all that they've heard and been brainwashed with.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. You get on and you're trying to help these people and show that you support them, and they don't agree with you at all. That's how much brainwashed they are. They think that what their government's doing is okay because they told them that it's okay. It is not okay to not have freedom. They won't know freedom until the CCP is taken down and the new federal state of China with Miles Guo takes over. They won't know freedom. And I hope someday that they do get to experience that. I know a lot of them are scared. They can't say anything out against their government. So I don't really argue with them. I don't see anything bad against them. I just try to make them realize. And sometimes it's hard, though, when people are when they're continuously brainwashed over and over and over again, and they feel comfortable. And some of them are comfortable living in that environment. They're okay with the fact that they have no freedom. They like their lives to be controlled completely by their government. That's not freedom to me.
Yeah, well, they don't really know another reality apart from the one that they're living, which is all the more important and segues perfectly onto our second video to see exactly how brainwashed the Chinese citizens are.
Yeah, so like Ada said, we're going to move on to the second video here. And basically what's happening is there's some very famous foreign brands like over here in the U.S., H&M, Nike, Adidas, that are putting sanctions out against China because they're using cotton from these fields that the Uyghurs work in, that they're basically slaves working in these fields. Please play the video for us, Matthew.
Retailing has become the latest battleground in the war of words over alleged human rights abuses in China's Xinjiang region. Beijing has launched a PR campaign against Western brands which have been critical of its practices in the territory. The move comes after days of tension between China and the West, with both sides imposing sanctions.
The fate of some foreign retail brands in China hangs in the balance as the ruling party clamps down on those criticizing its practices in Xinjiang. The uproar began with Swedish clothing giant H&M. It was singled out on Chinese state media for saying it was deeply concerned by reports of forced labor in Xinjiang, one of the world's largest cotton producers. The statement was made last year, but came into the spotlight again after it was highlighted on social media by a Communist Party youth group.
一些企业居然就相信了这种谣言，那么他自己怎么做是他自己的判断，但是我想中国的老百姓也有自由发表他们自己的观点，表达他们的感受。中国的市场就在这儿，不需要我们去专门搞什么胁迫，但是有一点是肯定的，可能现在中国老百姓也不允许一些外国人一边吃着中国的饭，一边砸着中国的碗。
H&M stores have been taken off the maps of tech giant Baidu. Its products have also been pulled from online shopping sites in its fourth largest market globally. Other brands are also feeling the backlash for previously voicing similar concerns about Xinjiang. At least 2 Chinese TV stars have ended all partnerships with Nike. Gaming giant Tencent has also pulled a new project with Burberry. Online, social media users are rallying for the Chinese to boycott goods from foreign brands. They want to support local instead.
作为一个中国人吧，起码是有一个爱国底线的，就是我觉得我本身就不买它，那我现在我更不会去买它，然后我也可能会呼吁我周围的朋友抵制它。
看到那个网上就是那些外国就是说那个赚咱们钱还骂咱们是吧，抹黑咱们那个新疆那个棉花。 就感觉以后就是不会买这些外国产品了嘛，就是支持国产。
The retail boycott is the latest front in a growing war of words over alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. China is accused of confining 1 million Uyghur Muslims to work camps, and Western nations have launched a coordinated effort to take China to task. The US, Canada, European Union and Britain have slapped sanctions on Chinese officials. Beijing has hit back with punitive measures of its own. China has always maintained the camps in Xinjiang are for re-education.
Thank you very much for that, Matthew. We appreciate it. So this is something I definitely talked about, and especially the cotton part. I remember before covering this, if you know, way back in the beginning when this show first was formed, one of the first couple episodes I talked about was how Xinjiang, how the Uyghurs are in these cotton fields picking this cotton. They were showing machines doing. I'm not sure if they're operating machines now or whatever, but I guess the cool thing about this is, and we're going to segue into this in the next video also, Ada, excuse me, is that these companies are now starting to catch on to the fact of what we've been trying to tell them for a long time now. Excuse me. Is that this cotton that Xinjiang, in the Xinjiang region, that's being picked by these slaves, these Uyghur slaves, is being used by these companies to make their clothing and their shoes or whatever they have that has cotton in it. So the companies now are saying we are no longer going to use this particular cotton from that region. And this is one of the biggest regions where they get the cotton from in China. So China's like, all right, you want to put sanctions against us? Good. Then we won't let you, we won't sell your, like if they use a different cotton from another region, China's saying, good, you want to use another cotton? We just won't use your company anymore in our country. And this kind of is a risky play for these companies to do this. But you have to stand up at some point. And this is, I've talked about this before, is that when you try to decouple from a country, which is what we're trying to do here, and luckily the rest of the nation's catching on, is decoupling is dangerous because China is such a huge part of the business that they pull in. Somebody right here like posted that there's 1.4 billion people in China, and the government's in control of 100% of them, and that's correct. And you know, going back to the entire human rights issue, they're not only slaves. The Uyghurs are not only slaves to the CCP. The entire nation or the entire country of China is. So these companies, H&M, Adidas, Nike, there's a bunch of them in this list, are saying no. We refuse to use that cotton that's from this region where these people are treated like slaves and there's genocide occurring. So, and of course, China's calling it the re-education camps. And we've seen the pictures. They're barbed wire, brick building concentration camps. That's what they are. What are your thoughts on all this, Ada?
Honestly, the first word that pops into my mind is ignorance. A lot of people are completely unaware, especially the Laobaixing in China, are completely unaware of what's actually happening in Xinjiang. So no one can actually blame them for the stance that they're taking with the Xinjiang cotton. And with the companies and brands that are boycotting Xinjiang cotton, it's not just Nike, it's not just Zara and H&M, it's 1,600 companies, because all of these companies work with BCI Cotton, which is the organization that verifies for fair trade and ethically farmed cotton. So all of the companies, including IKEA, including the Chinese brands Li Ning and APA, are all part of this foundation that supports fair trade, ethically sourced cotton. So when one's boycotting Xinjiang cotton, they're not just boycotting these brands, they're actually boycotting so much more and so many more companies, probably most of the big companies that are internationally imported into China. So with this being known, it's a bigger issue than just sanctioning a few companies such as H&M and Nike. And not only that, we know that Nike has actually taken this stance for years now with showing concern about the labor in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, but they're only resurfacing this issue. We will later talk about this as well, because the EU is sanctioning, because they're also, following the footsteps of the US, and they're working together, which is really hitting China a little close to home, because this is a huge market as well for them in terms of, trade. And with that, we also know that with EU sanctions, China sanctioning these companies, and with the forced sanctioning on both sides, it's just become very difficult, and the information's become very mixed within China. So people are now only seeing what China is releasing to them in terms of the information that they are receiving. So it's definitely just the key point is ignorance, and people are completely ignorant of the truth, which is why we have to talk about it all the more.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I have to do a side note here. We've been having some technical issues, and I've just gotten a message from our producer that there's some lagging issues going on with our videos tonight and our show in general. So we want to thank you for just hanging in there with us. We'll get through this together. We've seen a lot worse, and we've gotten through a lot worse. And Ada's been there right there with me with that. The funny thing is, we have a 24-hour around-the-clock surveillance team checking out our feeds and making sure that the CCP isn't interfering with our broadcast, which does happen from time to time. But we are having some issues, and we apologize to everyone for that in advance if it happens again. We're definitely working on that right now, and hopefully we'll get back up and running. Get to 100% here. Just got to kind of go with what we have right now. So great points there, Ada. And some great coverage there on what, the China and the percentage in the market and all that stuff with this cotton and this kind of, again, it's what this episode is about. It's about human rights and how China is trying to school us on what human rights is, and they themselves are committing genocide against their own people within the country and also within specific regions, especially the Xinjiang region. With that, we're going to move on to the next topic, which is countries uniting again to impose. This is now countries uniting, not just businesses, Nike, Adidas, and 1,600 others that you talked about. Countries are actually starting to be aware of all this. And what makes me really touches my heart about this, Ada, is we've been covering this now. For the first 22 episodes, we've been talking about the Uyghurs, and action is finally starting to happen. And I can tell you, someone that was a big influencer behind this, two people that were huge influencers of what's going on right now with our fight against the CCP and their treatment of the Uyghurs. Number one, Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States, and Mike Pompeo, his Secretary of State. And Mike still, and they both are, but Mike comes on TV every now and then to talk about the struggle of the Uyghurs, and he's one of the biggest supporters of that. So this is happening, Ada, and it's exciting. And that's one thing we got to kind of step back and say, you know what? We're making a difference, and it feels great. It really does. So let's now look at this video and see how countries are coming together against the CCP. Would you please roll that for us, Matt? Thank you.
Well, for more now, I'm joined by Julie Millsap. She's with the Campaign for Uyghurs, a group promoting and advocating human rights and democratic freedoms for Uyghurs. Julie, it's good to have you on the program. Before we discuss today's sanctions, I'd like to talk about your story. You used to live in China, and I understand you witnessed what is being done to the Uyghur minority there. What did you see?
Really, what I observed was just an overall deterioration in human rights situation in general, particularly under Xi Jinping. I was not living in the Uyghur region. I was actually in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, and even there, we began to witness the discrimination that Uyghurs were facing across the country. It was really, really striking, and while they've faced decades of oppression, it's very clear that things have really deteriorated in the last few years.
Today's sanctions, they are the first international response to the situation for Uyghurs in China. Their situation, our knowledge of their situation, that is nothing new. So do you know what triggered this coordinated response from the U.S., the U.K., Canada, and the European Union?
We're very pleased to see. I believe that this is really building off of what President Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken have said about a need for stronger alliances to confront China. We really see this as a really positive sign that they are committed to that approach, and we believe this will be effective.
These are sanctions on individuals, just 4 people targeted by the EU sanctions, for example. Do you think that's going to make a difference? Well, does that go far enough?
I wouldn't say that it goes far enough, but it is a very strong step, and the symbolism of this is extremely important, especially because China, the Chinese regime, cares so much about faith. This really sends a strong signal, including to the Chinese people, in spite of what the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said. This does make it clear that this is not a U.S. versus China issue, as the CCP has tried to paint it as, but is in fact of such an egregious nature that even Europe is getting involved and everyone is coming together on it. It's extremely important important step.
On your group's website, the question is posed, why are we not talking about the Uyghur genocide? There has been coverage in the media, and yet it hasn't captured the public's attention. Why do you think that is?
Several reasons. One being it's very slow to obtain information because of how information is heavily censored in China. A lot of the things that we're analyzing now are actually from several years ago. And the media has been sadly quite slow to report on some aspects of it. For example, the fact that people are dying in detention, while the international communities kind of had this scholarly approach to debating whether or not it's genocide. In fact, early on, there have been indications of how the Genocide Convention was being breached. So part of it is that, the lack of access to information. Then, of course, another aspect of it is just the willful silence of many governments because of their economic ties to China.
And Julie, let me ask you before we have to let you go, what are you lobbying governments to do next?
Several things. One of the big things I think that all governments should be looking at is participation in the 2022 Olympics. While that may not seem like the most high priority issue, it in fact is extremely important to Beijing and sending a message regarding what we are willing or not willing to accept. So we all are encouraging all governments to consider at very least implementing a diplomatic boycott. As we've seen even today with these sanctions, you can no longer deny the gravity of what is happening in China and what the regime is committing. And so it's very important that we make it clear and continue to send those clear messages that we will not be involved in anything that China is pushing forth while it's connected to active genocide.
Julie Millsap, Director of Public Affairs and Advocacy at Campaign for Uyghurs. Julie, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, I believe your mic is not on at the moment.
Okay, hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was so excited. I'm not going to lose that, though. This is really, really exciting. And I want to kind of piggyback on what Julie Millsap was saying. She runs this Campaign for the Uyghurs, which is an amazing company. She's earned, what she talked about at the end there is what's the most exciting part is now that this ball is rolling, we got to stick to our guns with everything. So we're going to boycott these four individuals. First of all, it is a slow step, but it's the symbolism that she's talking about, that we are recognizing it. Biden and Blinken are recognizing this. The other nations that are involved, US, UK, China, the European Union, they're all cognizant of what's going on in Xinjiang now. I feel like we've done a lot here, Ada. And one of the things, that the reporter said is why haven't we seen coverage in the media? Because they haven't been watching The Fringe on GTV. Isn't that right, Ada?
That is right, David. But this is something that we must praise Biden for following Mike Pompeo's footsteps of creating more allies within the EU, as the forces are definitely stronger when joined together. So we see has been a very effective response from China. With the sanctioning and the boycotting of the companies, we see that China does what they do often, which is boycotting because they feel like they have a lot of people, therefore they take a lot of the market share, which is why them boycotting a certain brand has been effective in the past. It's been effective when China and Japan had their quarrel and everybody was boycotting Japanese cars. However, what Chinese people don't realize is that they're actually only hurting themselves, because these products that they're burning, the Nike shoes, the Japanese cars, and the foreign brand products are things that they bought with their own money. So the government isn't hurting at all. They have not lost a penny from all of these boycotts. But the Chinese people are just hurting themselves. And this is something that we urge our Chinese viewers out there to realize as well, is that doing so, your government isn't sacrificing at all. Only you are, and that is not something a government should be doing. The CCP should not be making their people suffer.
Right, and it's and the sanctions. These are, like they said, these are a strong step. These sanctions, the symbolism is, like she said, like Ms. Millsap said, is what's really important. That we're doing this, that we're uniting with other countries to do this, and the thing is, China is not going to be able to stand on their own 2 feet if this goes further, which I hope it does. And you know, we've had some choice words to say about President Biden, and we might even say a few more tonight. But him and Blinken doing this, I got to give him props for this. We even have to praise the left sometimes, because in the end, we all want the same thing, and we know that, Ada, is to take down the CCP. We are looking at the beginning of what might be the falling of the CCP. This is very, very exciting to me. And for anyone that follows this show or watches GTV or listens to Miles Guo and listens to what the wisdom this man has to share and what he has to say, this is happening right now. I really get this feeling, I'm just getting chills right now, thinking that this can really pick up steam. And the problem with it is that the more we say, that countries say that China is doing this and the CCP is doing this to their people, the more they deny it, the more the CCP denies it. And that's where you have a big problem. But I think in the end, yes, they do have a lot of money hidden away in their coffers or whatever. China can't survive without the rest of the world. There's no way. We just have to be able to become self-reliant. And President number 45, Donald J. Trump, did that. We tried to make everything American. He was building more factories in America. He was, you know, the pipeline, the oil pipeline coming from Canada to America. Everything was America first, America first. And that's how you overcome this. You don't depend on China anymore. This, Ada, is so big. This is the beginning of what could be classified as the decoupling from China. It's going to take baby steps in the beginning, but these are very, very positive steps. What's happening right now is a very, very strong indication that we are, along with choice nations, like we said, the US, Canada, the European Union, the UK, are taking those steps to start the decoupling process. And they are showing. Now they're talking about boycotting the Olympics. You got to keep that ball rolling, that snowball rolling downhill, and gets bigger and bigger, Ada. We can't stop now. This is the beginning of it, and we have to keep going. If you want this to end, if you want the CCP to be disbanded and to completely eradicate the CCP, we have to stay the course that we're on right now. And this is a very, very exciting start, Ada.
And you know what, David? I feel like China might be, hurting themselves with the boycott, because with the upcoming Olympics, it might have to be canceled anyways, as all of the national teams wear Nike. There's been a long-term partnership with Nike and all of China's national sports teams. So everything they're wearing, every uniform, swimsuit, basketball jersey, they're all sponsored by Nike. So unless they're gonna make everything new again for next year's Olympic, or they're just going to have to forget about the sanctions. So
or
I
Adidas.
thought about that. I don't know. I mean, Adidas isn't a choice for them anymore. And I know that Li Ning is now talking about, like the Chinese sports brand Li Ning is talking about supporting Xinjiang cotton and using Xinjiang cotton because they want everything to be made in China. But we all know with manufacturing and production, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work overnight. So this is something that we have to point out as well and see how China responds to that.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to what I was saying previously about being I was harassed myself on YouTube by people. I'm assuming they're from China or the CCP about how we need to take care of our own people before we start worrying about them and that, etc. But again. The influence of the CCP over these people is so sad. But I think, again, this is exciting. It's very huge. We're taking very, very positive steps toward what I think ultimately will be the eradication of the CCP. And this is such a great start. And it almost feels like it's a very small victory in a very big battle, but it's an important one, Ada. And we will definitely continue to cover our beloved Uyghurs and how this is affecting the rest of the world and how they're seeing what's going on here. And I've said it before, I certainly hope we do boycott the Olympics, because if you stop with the sanctions or you pick and choose which ones you want to do or not do, that's not going to work. You have to be in 100% in the game, pun intended, the Olympics. But we can hold the Olympics somewhere else They can reschedule them for another place at another time. Doesn't need to be in Beijing next year as they have it scheduled. And the way it's looking right now, they're going to be boycotted. I feel bad for the Olympians that, worked their whole lives to get to that point. The greatest athletes in the world, all of them, really. I mean, to even get to that point is just an amazing feat. We certainly don't want to take that away from them. But at some point, you have to draw that line between what's socially acceptable, the human rights, and what you want because you're an athlete, and we have a problem in the U.S. with our own athletes not wanting to cross that line, and because the money's too important to them or the fame. But when it comes to human rights, you can't. There's a hard line there. There is a distinction, and you have to draw that distinction, and you have to go with the side that is in support and that opposes human rights violations. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, David, I'm just saying it's definitely difficult, and we understand that because China is such a big market. I mean, it's 23% of Nike's market, but Nike is speaking up about Xinjiang, which we also give them props for. And we understand that a lot of companies, including Elon Musk's Tesla, is working with China because of the huge market that's there, which is why China feels like they have the control over a lot of companies because they have control over the 1.4 billion people who holds a huge market. And this is why it's so important that we repeat over and over again, decoupling is so important because we need to let China know that, they're not the bosses here and they're not the ones that's holding all of the dice, because we have to be sure that they know they can't just do these things without going unnoticed.
Yeah, one of our fringers sent a message just now, and this is something that popped into my head, and I read this message, I'm like, wow, there was fate that I was going to talk about this real quick. Never sell your soul to the devil. He wrote this, I'm not going to say his name for anonymity reasons, but it says, do not dance with devils. And that's right. You don't. Yeah. You don't dance with the devil. You don't sell your soul to the devil. You pick the good side. You pick the side of the Lord, and you go with, humanity. And that's what it's all about. Money is not worth no amount of money or production or your company getting more money or benefiting from this. Hollywood just did it with Avatar. They re-released it in China because they wanted to make more money for the movie. That's a complete sellout. That's selling your soul to the devil. And that's exactly what Hollywood does anyway, so I'm not even surprised with that. But yeah, great point there, Fringer out there. I'm not going to say your name, but thank you. And yeah, that's what it's about. Don't sell your soul to the devil. And that's exactly what you're doing when you're taking the side of China in this, and you are saying, it's okay, we'll do it because it'll make us a lot of money. No, you can't do that. It's just not, morally acceptable whatsoever. Okay, so we're going to move on now, Ada. We have our next section here. We have some great news. This is kind of bittersweet because of all the tragedy that's been involved, but we have a little video clip here for you about Myanmar and how hundreds of their captives have been set free. So let's roll that video, please.
Joy at the gates of this prison in Yangon as relatives waited anxiously to be reunited with their loved ones, freed by the junta. Among the 628 ex-detainees, Tian Zhao, a photographer for the news agency Associated Press. He was arrested during the military's brutal crackdown on anti-coup protests. Experts say at least 2,000 people have been detained since demonstrations began in February.
Thanks to all those who worked so hard for my release. I'm upset because there are some people inside. I hope they can get out as soon as possible.
The gesture by the military has done little to appease protesters. Demonstrators continue to explore new ways to show their anger. After weeks of violence in Myanmar's capital, the streets of Yangon were quiet Wednesday. This as thousands heeded calls from anti-coup activists to stage a silent strike.
I'm not going out anywhere, and I won't do anything which disturbs the silent strike. We believe we will prevail in our revolution. This belief strengthens us and makes us united.
The somber mood was also felt in Mandalay as the city continues to mourn the death of Kin Moya Cheat, a 7-year-old girl who was shot by security forces while she sat on her father's lap. Rights groups say at least 20 children have been killed in the crackdown. Kin Moya's sister wants this to stop.
I feel so sad. I hope no more kids will have to die like this.
Myanmar's junta continues to face international condemnation. Several countries have called for an end to the coup and the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. The ousted leader was due to appear in court via video call Wednesday, but the hearing was postponed for the second time as a result of internet issues.
As a result of internet issues, yeah, I wonder what that was about. Yeah, so again, this is so bittersweet. And I guess if you heard, if you're listening to the story out there, Fringers, it's bittersweet because there's 2,000 people detained, but they let 620 go. But I don't know if that was political propaganda, the soldiers waving at them as they left in the bus. That felt a little bit creepy to me. I'm not sure what that was about. If they truly wanted to wave to these people and felt happy that they were leaving, I don't know. I don't get that. Do the soldiers, are they, whose side are they on here? They're the ones that took over the government. So, and then the 7-year-old girl getting shot while she was sitting in her father's lap. That's just horrible. I couldn't imagine, the pain that must be felt by him having his daughter die in his lap after being shot by the military force there. And then, of course, 20 total children killed so far. And they're facing, international condemnation. So here we go again. We're starting to unite and understand, and this stuff needs to be talked about, needs to be covered. We've talked about Myanmar several times on this show, and we certainly hope that they can come to some kind of conclusion soon. And this was all based on some election fraud called out by the militia there, the junta that has taken over this country. And we certainly hope that they come to some kind of agreement and figure this thing out. And these people, the silent protest, I like that. People are a lot more safer with a silent protest.
Yes.
But they sure were effective when they were out there in the street. People are going to sacrifice their lives for their freedom, and it happens all the time. And they've done it in Hong Kong. We've done it here in the United States. It happens everywhere. That's the price of freedom. And I hope they certainly find that freedom very soon.
Yes, and this is something that we've certainly not seen the director of foreign ministry talk about in China, when it's something that they don't want to speak up for, and they don't want to go against. So they just completely turn a blind eye to something that is happening that they have allegedly supported, because we've seen weapons and bullet cases with Chinese writing on it. Obviously, this is something that they're not going to own up to, but we already know that with issues like this, we must stand on the side of democracy, and we know the U.S. has spoken up, and a lot of the countries and the U.S.'s allies have spoken up about the military coup in Myanmar doing these horrible things, the junta doing these horrible things to their own people. And obviously, we here at the Fringe, we're completely against any of the countries who are hurting their own. Very similar to the genocide of the Uyghurs in China. Those are hurting their own people. But we do hope that there are more cases of the release of those that are captivated. And we hope that those people are quickly going to find their freedom, as well as their democratic leader, Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yeah, it's definitely a good start. Freeing these people. It's good news. When I read this, I was happy. I was happy to see that they're making some kind of progress. It's a little disturbing that the internet's not working, so they couldn't have her trial or have a meeting or talk to her or anything. So we'll have to keep our eye on this one and see where it heads. Our last story tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about a missile or missiles that were fired in North Korea. Let's roll that video, please.
Japan's leader says North Korea launched 2 ballistic missiles into the sea near his country on Thursday, a step up from a weekend test of shorter-range weapons and adding new pressure onto the Biden White House. The Japanese government said one missile flew about 260 miles, pointing to a short-range missile. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga told reporters he would bring up the launch next month in a visit to Washington.
The first launch in only less than a year represents a threat to peace and stability in Japan and the region, and violates UN resolutions.
He also added he would work to ensure a safe and secure Olympics, now set for late July. UN Security Council resolutions ban North Korea from testing ballistic missiles. North Korea has not tested a nuclear weapon or its longest-range intercontinental ballistic missile since 2017, ahead of a historic meeting in Singapore between leader Kim Jong-un and former U.S. President Donald Trump in 2018. Senior U.S. officials told Reuters this week Biden officials are in the final stages of reviewing their North Korea policy. Analysts have noted a change in wording from the previous administration, emphasizing the denuclearization of North Korea rather than North and South, a more unilateral position unlikely to go down well in Pyongyang. Japan's leader says North.
Well, this is certainly disturbing news. President Trump, of course, kept us out of war. He stopped the war in the Middle East that was going on for years that nobody could stop. And Biden's working on his third war in a row right now. Just in this few 65 days in his presidency, where we have this thing going on with China, and now Russia, and now North Korea. I remember President Trump going over to North Korea and at least keeping it calm with them over there. That's what you're supposed to do. Protect the people of your own nation by, having truces with other nations that could possibly be, going off the deep end or messing around with nuclear weapons. But that's what communist parties do, though. They want to, have control of everything. And we haven't heard a lot about North Korea lately because we've been dealing so much with China. But this is definitely something that we need to keep an eye on. And in China, which I'm not opposed to Russia, and now we have these, it's the three countries that Biden, has got up in arms about everything. And again, it's China, which I'm not opposed to, and Russia, and now North Korea. And Russia, our situation with them is, they're basically, Putin's been making fun of Biden, saying, "Come on, man, you want to call me a killer? Let's have a press conference, and then we'll see who's smarter than who." And that's how Putin's been his whole career. I mean, he's just he's a bully himself. So we really, these are some trying times. We're trying to deal with China, and we got Russia and North Korea breathing down our necks, and now they're launching missiles. And this isn't unusual for North Korea anyway. They've done this before. Like I said, Trump has had an amicable relationship with North Korea and Russia because they knew he couldn't be bullied. And that's the problem. We do support, Biden and Blinken with the way they're handling this Chinese situation at CCP. But we also need to remember that there are other countries in this world that are a threat. And Trump having that amicable relationship with North Korea and Russia was great. And now we see how important that is to have that now that Biden's in office, and it isn't happening. They're pretty much taking him like a joke because of all the strife that we have going on within our country. They couldn't bully Trump, and they feel like they can bully Biden. What do you think about all that, Ada?
Yes, David, I think it's certainly concerning when the U.S. has a tricky relationship with all China, Russia, and North Korea. These are definitely three nations you don't want to mess with at the same time, yet all three of them are definitely not happiest with the U.S. right now. And we can see that Japan is very concerned as a close neighbor of North Korea, with North Korea shooting out missiles and testing out missiles right now, which is why Japan is calling out for help from not only the U.S., but the UN to continue to speak to North Korea. And we know that the rewarding has definitely provoked Kim Jong-un, with the rewarding not being, controlling Korea, north and south of the missile usage, but North Korea, just North Korea alone. And we know that ruffling Kim Jong-un's feather is definitely not their best step right now, or not the U.S.'s best step right now, as we have seen in the past that North Korea tends to go off the deep end at times and just use their powers for a very bad purpose.
Yeah, and I kind of want to get away with that. We just got breaking news here, Ada. I received this actually this morning, and it happened this morning. Former CDC director says COVID-19 escaped from the lab in Wuhan, China. So this is the former director of the CDC saying this. Zero Hedge published it. And basically they're saying this escaped. And one of the comments which caught my eye was, so what? What are nations going to do about it? Answer, nothing. So I'd like to talk about this a little bit because this is very, very big. We have the former CDC director saying that this came from a lab and this came from the lab in Wuhan, China, which is Dr. Li Yinmeng was saying this whole time. For some reason, our left, the mainstream media quelled this information and made sure that we didn't talk about it that much. And this was very unusual how this one got kind of brushed aside, Ada. And we know for a fact, we do know because Dr. Li Yinmeng did say that this came from that lab in Wuhan. And we've been talking about this now since she came over here to the U.S. and became a whistleblower and joined our movement, one of the bravest women ever. Actually, Steve Bannon named her the 2020 Woman of the Year on the War Room. As a side note there. But this information coming out is very, very huge. This could possibly, hopefully, unlike what this gentleman said, what are people going to do about it? Nothing. Maybe this is what people need to hear for something to be done about this. We know from experience what's happened with the COVID virus. And it said that when we first started when Dr. Yen came over here and was talking about it and said it did come from a lab in Wuhan, no action was taken. And this gentleman's right. There was nothing. Nobody really did anything about it. It was a full year and then 3 months of preparation for the CDC WHO to let China know that, hey, we're going to come to the lab in 3 months. So you might want to clean it up over there before we get there because we know how crooked they are. They have, China has them in their back pocket. So they go over there, they find nothing. But now we see the CDC director saying, a former CDC director saying that this is from the lab in Wuhan and something we've already known. Miles Guo is known, Dr. Yen is known, and we've been trying to tell people this. I think this news is just as big as the news of us taking a stance, nations starting to take a stance, not only businesses, but nations taking a stance against the CCP and their genocide of the Uyghurs. So we're talking about a different form of genocide here, obviously. It's the genocide of the rest of the world by creating this virus that's killed off millions. So what do you think about all this breaking news here, Ada?
I remember when COVID-19 just broke out in early 2020, that CDC deemed that it was not transmittable between human and human. And I remember exactly when Dr. Yang came over to the U.S. in early January and told the rest of the world, or tried to warn the rest of the world, that this is a lab-created virus and it definitely can transmit between people. And if the CDC said it any earlier and warned the U.S. citizens and the rest of the world any earlier, we know that so many deaths could have been avoided. However, there were allegations that the CDC was, or the director at the time, or the team at the time, was BYG'd or BGY'd by the CCP, which is not surprising at all because the CCP tried to everything in their power to make sure people didn't know where the virus came from. And they're still trying to do that by stonewalling WHO and the US from further investigations of how the virus was created in the lab. And we know that with our current vaccination, there are definitely side effects of the vaccine, and people are worried about how effective the vaccine is as well. We know that everybody could be so much more comfortable and feel so much safer if we knew exactly how the virus was created, the exact chain of DNA of the virus, so that an according and completely compatible vaccine can be created that can be proven to be 100% useful. And that is exactly what we need right now.
That's right. So I'm going to read this quote here from this gentleman. This is former CDC Director Robert Redfield said that SARS-CoV-2, COVID, the virus which caused COVID-19, did not originate from a wet market in Wuhan, China, and instead escaped from a nearby lab which was performing gain-of-function research of bat coronaviruses to make them more easily infect humans. He said, I do not believe this somehow came from a bat to a human. He told CNN's Sanjay Gupta in an interview set to air on Sunday night at 9 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time. So we're going to have to watch that, everybody, Sunday night at 9. Normally, when a pathogen goes from a zoonote to human, it's an animal, it takes a while for it to figure out how to become more and more efficient in human-to-human transmission. It's only opinion, and I'm allowed to have opinions now, he added. So this guy's speaking out because he's not working for them anymore. When he asked how he believes the lab was working to make the virus infect humans more efficiently, he said, let's just say I have a coronavirus and I'm working on it. Most of us in the lab are trying to grow virus. We try to make it grow better and better and better and better so we can do experiments and figure out about it. That's the way I put it together. That's what he said. And that's scary. And we talked about this before also, Ada. Gordon Chang came on and another gentleman talking about how this COVID-19 was only the beginning. It's only a marker for the next step, which is that the CCP wants to create a virus that wipes out humanity, wipes out the rest of the world, and then only people that they give the vaccine to will be immune to it, which is a sick way of thinking. And we certainly hope that that's not happening. But we talked Tuesday about how there's labs all over the place. I think there's 100 labs right now. I saw something that there's hundreds of labs that they're doing the same thing and all this experimentation with this new warfare, this chemical and biological warfare. It's a very scary time, Ada. And when you're talking about vaccines, I'm certainly not getting a shot. I won't. Because they just don't, there's just not enough information, hasn't been out there long enough. I appreciate President Trump for pushing that through. So we do have a vaccine. But I myself, honestly, I'm not ready for it right now. Maybe at some point I will, but not right now. I have to have more confidence in it and see, hate to say it, just kind of sit back and see what happens here. I think I have a strong enough immune system to fight against this disease anyway, or this virus. But it is scary to think that the Chinese, that the CCP's out there, Ada, creating a virus that's going to wipe out humanity. What do you think about that?
In the past, we have compared the Nazis with the CCP side by side, but the only difference is that the Nazis, where Hitler wanted their own people, the Germans and the pureblood, to be elites and wipe out the rest. So whomever they deem as unimportant or the ones that they don't want alive. However, the CCP is different because they want to wipe out all of humanity, even their own. So no one's safe. And this is a government that we've not seen in the past. It's just completely satanic. We don't understand how they're thinking, and we don't understand why they're doing this, but we do know that they must be stopped. Because if this goes on any further, the death roll will be much higher than the millions that's already suffered from COVID-19.
Oh, yeah, much higher as in, wipe out the whole world except for us, the CCP, sorry, not the Chinese, but yeah, and Gordon Chang even said it to a point to where they're going to make, like I said, they're going to make a vaccine that is only effective to the people that take it, or it won't, or the virus won't affect. They're so far advanced that it won't affect, he said, Chinese people. So I'm thinking, wow, man, that's just some crazy stuff. I better look over my shoulder because I'm certainly, as you can tell, I'm not Chinese. So that's what they're saying, though.
Yes. So
hate to end it on that note.
Yes.
But we are out of time here on the Fringe tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We again are on every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. right here on gtv.org, MOS Talk. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much for being here with us. And definitely we hope that from all that we have delivered tonight, that everybody can just question a little of all of the news that they're receiving, whether if it's for the CCP, against the CCP, but just question the fundamentals of what is happening and the truth that is out there.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Ada. I really appreciate having you on the show every Friday with me. Well, it's been every Friday and Tuesday. Our other co-host, Isla, will be back on Tuesday. She's been out on assignment. She's been very busy. So Ada's been able to fill in, and I really appreciate the time that I spend with you, Ada. It's always great to converse with you about what's going on in our world and what we need to look out for and to get this news out to our fringers out there. I want to. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Again, we certainly appreciate your patronage. We really do. I want to thank my production team out there for helping us tonight, our OBS crew, Matthew, and our translators and our behind-the-scenes research crew to do all the hard work so we can get on screen and look beautiful and give the news to you the best way we know how. For the Fringe, I am David Vincent Bob. I appreciate, again, having you this evening. We'll see you again on Tuesday at 7 p.m. You all have a great weekend and have a good night. God bless you and your families, and be safe. Thank you, and have a great night.
Good night.
这碗酒竟沾有共匪灭在咱的手，好酒。喝了咱的酒啊，看破中共假恶丑。喝了咱的酒啊，咱的心爱的自由。喝了咱的酒啊，心头山河一声吼。喝了咱的酒啊，不灭恶党誓不休。春天一呀举酒中，真心的共跟我走。好酒啊，好酒啊，好酒！70年前共匪团的战力，如今1946年在中华大地，管天管地管空气，中间还管着你的生殖器。老百姓们活的不如猪狗，人民的财富被他们统统卷走，传统文化全都化为乌有。罗山爷们，你们难道还没受够？这帮孙子天天在搞双休，这皇帝的头把你思想左右，看不尽的眼泪不停的流，和谐小康社会，我去你个头！喝了咱的酒啊，看破中共假恶丑。喝了咱的酒啊，咱的心爱的自由。喝了咱的酒啊，心头山河一声吼。喝了咱的酒啊，不灭恶党誓不休。春天一呀举酒中，真心的共跟我走。好酒啊，好酒啊，好酒！正义将清酒交到你的手，天南地北从此与我便是战友。我和城市走肉，抗争不分先后，传播真相不管黑夜白昼。干了这碗酒，豪气涌上心头，死的未来是我战斗的理由。舍去爱恨情仇，不去抛在脑后，为自由灭中共，不言不休。报了革命这碗酒，敬天，敬地，敬战友，新中国联邦人永不为奴，跟我走。 先阳谷县那些，咱走走看。